my pronouns are any and everything.
The issue is that option's been taken away now, because if you take your kids to public school, they will be introducing, non-binary, different genders, all these ideas.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
That's
to
gonna
children.
shake up,
And
that's
well,
gonna shake up the education system.
Yeah, well, when you're born, they tell you either a boy or a girl, right?
They don't have sort of like groups to support gay and lesbian transgender groups within the school.
so non-binary, is that a scientific fact?
The waitlist currently for top surgery if you're a trans man.
But
So-
if we live under a secular state, why is the government making this mandatory for everyone? Isn't this a bit of a dictatorship? Legalize LGBTQ relationships in all these countries, yeah?
Yes, that's right.
Could you please educate me about trans rights? What rights do trans don't have?
Oh my god.
By the way, you don't have to speak to
I
me. You
don't-
could say go away and I completely
I think there's better people to ask. I'll
Okay.
have to
You?
properly think about it.
So we were just having a conversation
Yeah.
walking down about how nice it would be if everybody was able to just be themselves without judgment, without criticism, and just, be very, very comfortable.
I personally enjoyed talking to these two people over here. They were friendly and yeah, they just made me feel comfortable. If I take what she says literally, that people should just be allowed to exist without judgment, without criticism, and just be very comfortable, I feel like that is such an unrealistic standard. It's unrealistic because people have opinions, and also in a secular state, you're gonna have what you call freedom of speech, freedom of thoughts. As a Muslim, for example, when I looked into my religion, you see this ancient record, historic record of, scholars debating each other, critiquing Islam on certain topics. Like, no idea is free from critiques, but critiquing within a framework, in a sense. You can't insult someone, be rude, because it just shows you're not genuine. But you're allowed to critique, you're allowed to say, I don't agree with this concept.
And I think that is one of the rights that trans people don't have, that they can't genuinely just be themselves without judgment and criticism.
I think trans people at the moment are currently this kind of go-to target for like a culture war that is being kind of generally imposed by the right-wing political parties across the world at the moment.
We all live under secularism. If you're religious, gay, straight, black, it doesn't matter. You live by your values and morals. So one more last question before you go enjoy yourselves. How do you feel about introducing this idea to children?
Love it. I love it.
You love it.
Yeah.
Any age or...
Yeah. I think the problem is that people have tried to weaponize trans identity and different gender identities into being a sexual thing, and it isn't a sexual thing to educate people that
I agree with that. It
some
doesn't
people
have to be
different
sexual.
identities.
Yeah,
So therefore, children generally as a default are exposed to heterosexual couples and people who are cisgender all the time from day one.
Children are by default exposed to cis relationships. It's like they're exposed because that's the majority of people. It's because you need a biological male and women to produce a child. I do find this narrative that the left have attached themselves to, the narrative of tit for tat. Oh, we've had this for so long, religious people dictating to us, gender roles, and okay, so now we have to completely go the other way. We have to completely, be extreme. We have to show our ideology onto other people. We're making things mandatory, like sex educations in school.
So there's no harm in educating them that other people don't fit into those kind of binaries.
Okay.
I think everyone should be exposed and educated to all the differences that exist amongst people in general, without demonizing any part. And that could be the case for anything that kids are taught in school. If this kind of issue with gender and trans identities and things is very similar to the sexuality issue in the 80s in this country. Like, there was a lot of scaremongering, and people said they shouldn't be taught, kids shouldn't be exposed to it, shouldn't be seen, shouldn't be taught, or anything like that. In reality, it's just people just trying to live their lives.
What's living your life has to do with my child. Now you're infringing on my life. This ideology that has a monopoly on us in Britain is all about emotions. It's illogical. When he spoke about the issue of sexualities in the 80s in Britain, how that was hyped up and so on, I think it was Candace Owens, I watched one of her podcasts where she speaks about in America, there is literally a correlation between, you know, young people having sex more often and, you know, teenage pregnancies. There is a correlation between that and sex education. It's actually harming children to, you know, be educated about this because they're more likely to explore, and when you're a teenager you're impulsive.
You know, so I think it's good, especially in school and school age, for kids to be exposed to all different perspectives, all different ways of life, give people understanding from different perspectives, different lived experiences, and then people can make their own decisions and go about their lives as they want to, but from an informed place.
Okay, so as a secular state such as Britain, we value freedom of choice. How do we deal with people who are like, I don't feel comfortable my child being exposed to this idea. I respect trans, I respect, you know, all these types of movements, but I don't want my child to be exposed to this because it's been made mandatory. Shouldn't the government at least make a choice? Like, those who want to be exposed to this, they can, and those who they don't want to is the parents' choice.
I think it's a tricky one.
Do you agree?
I think it's a tough one because I think it is freedom. So if you don't want your children to be exposed to it, then you should be well within your rights to keep your children from things you don't want them exposed to. But we also live in a world where those children are going to grow up and they're going to be exposed to things that maybe their parents have kept them away from. And so then, is it beneficial for them to be kept away from it when they're younger and then thrust into it as they get older and really don't understand? It's a tough one.
It's a very good point. For me personally, I was never really, as a Moroccan Muslim, I never really, I guess, was exposed to this myself, but I was when I went to comprehensive school. So that is 10, 11 years old. I've been taught to respect people. We're all different. So what people fear is that this is moving towards indoctrination, and people feel, just like religious people used to shove their ideas onto people's faces, people feel the same now, taking their kids to public school and, you know, all the flags, or they're like, they feel, do you know what I mean?
I do, I completely understand.
There's a difference between indoctrination and exposing people to difference.
Yeah, and education.
So he talks about the difference. There's a huge difference between education and indoctrination, and I completely get that critique. However, it is indoctrination based in some instances, and I will explain right now. Replacing children's books with new woke books. So if you have a boisterous boy, you know, he's rough and tumble, he will be introduced one-way narratives, a book about how that's wrong. Again, now we've entered like ideas of wrong and right, which is a concept that is from religion, you know? So it's very interesting. I would have absolutely no problem, and I wouldn't call it indoctrination based if schools had wide range of different books. So, you know, you have books that, you know, these boisterous boys can relate to. So yeah, there are some books that are going to feminize little boys, push one-way narratives about certain topics. And again, if this has to be introduced, I just hope that these schools also have a fair representation of the other side. Here's another indoctrination and hypocritical and truly a loophole that the government has produced. Did you know RSE, relationship sex education, has been made mandatory in Britain for primary schools? Okay, we got that. They also teach them RE, which is religious studies. So you're not able to withdraw your child from RSE, but you can withdraw your child from religious studies lessons. Certain modules or something you can withdraw your child from. So I'm like, that's interesting. But you don't have that option for RSE unless your child, for example, is on a spectrum, she is autistic, and they won't be able to understand some certain topics. It will give them anxiety and so on. Then you can withdraw your child from.
It just so happens I have anxiety.
That should tell you everything. It should tell you that this modern liberalist ideology is here to stay. It's oppressive. It wants you to believe in that which it believes in. And the irony here, this is done under terms like compassion, inclusion, and so on. The third indoctrination element, your schools in Britain are more than likely showing your children content from third-party organizations such as CBBC. It's actually indoctrination based to sit children down and show them a program on BBC, CBBC, whatever, about, I think it's called Adventures with My Daddies, which they show them a same-sex couple with children. They literally sit them down to watch that. That's actually indoctrination based, because what you're doing, you're forcing children to see that situation without that situation taking place organically in the real world. In the West, those children will inevitably be exposed to same-sex people.
A lot of people in this country went to, for example, primary schools which are religious, like Christian schools.
Yeah.
You know, and we had to sing hymns and we had to pray and do all these
Yeah.
things. You know, I think quite confidently say the majority of people are not those people are probably not religious, but we had that exposure, we had an education about it, but it didn't necessarily harm us. And I think exposing people to different perspectives, educating people on different ways of life is not the same as indoctrination. And it's, I think you're absolutely right in terms of people are going to experience these things and be exposed to these things in real life outside of school, outside of their immediate family circles.
Especially comprehensive schools, usually when you're exposed to everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think a lot of people find change very uncomfortable. And it is, and it comes from a place of wanting to be safe. Like it doesn't come from a negative place, I think. But I think that's where education and exposure and getting to know people and actually, engaging and interacting with people who are different to yourselves and are outside of your immediate circle of influence and everything is very helpful for educating yourself.
There's no way of keeping everybody happy all of the time because we're all different. We all think differently. We all believe different things. And so I think we're always going to be in a society, in a world where there are people that just don't like it, don't want their children exposed to it, and there is nothing that anybody can do about it. And then as those children go up, it's down to them to decide.
I completely agree, but the issue is that option's been taken away now, because if you take your kids to public school, they will be introducing non-binary, different genders, all these ideas.
Oh, wow.
Yes,
That's
children.
and shake up the
I
education
think, but I think that is the reality of the world that we live in. So you can only go so far and say it's indoctrination, but you can't deny that those people exist.
Okay, so how would you feel if you took your kid into school and there is a religious man with a cloak, a cross, who's coming to educate your kids about Judaism or Islam?
I quite like it.
Stop the cap.
But that doesn't happen. That's not happening right now, is it?
I'm not
In what
sure.
sense?
Shalom.
Some schools, they're sending drag queens to perform for children.
Oh,
Some of
I've
them
read
are
about this.
Drag queens are not going there to sexualize children or to behave in a sexually suggestive way. It's just a fun thing that has been going on and has been going on for decades and decades and decades. Like the stuff that's happening now is not new. Like everyone's different. Everyone has different upbringing, different experiences, and different understanding of how to do things.
So one
there's
question
a
before
balance.
I let you go. Do you think it's good that the government has made it mandatory for primary school?
I think it's good that the government is trying to make sure that people are educated on different people's identities.
I'm slightly on the fence because I think that we live in a world where it's great to know these things, and I would be absolutely fine if it was happening in my son's school because he has had exposure to these things anyway. But I do feel for the people who are against, who have those beliefs and
Not
those feelings.
necessarily hatred,
Yeah,
not
absolutely. But just they just don't want their children around it. So I do appreciate how they must be feeling. So the government making it mandatory, that's a tough one. But I do think it's important that everybody is educated because this is the world we live in.
Hi. What is this on your top? Value education, value educators.
I'm a teacher and
Oh,
I'm
okay.
a trade union officer, and we
Okay.
are from the National
This is-
Education Union.
So you're a teacher. This is a fantastic question for you then. How do you feel about RSE being made mandatory in the UK? They're going to be introducing ideas to children like non-binary.
It's about how it's done. I think RSC is really important and it shouldn't be avoided. but I do think it's appropriate to make it. It's important to make it age appropriate.
It's not the vibe. Stop!
Do you think it's right to make it mandatory? Because this is not sex education, how to stay safe. This is introducing gender ideology.
That's where perhaps our opinions differ,
Yeah.
because I believe education about facts is something everyone should have in their life. If someone's trying to push an agenda, that's different.
Non-binary, is that a scientific fact?
I wouldn't have enough personal experience to make an
Yeah.
authoritative
But
statement
you
on
just
that.
said you care about facts.
There are certain rules against trying to impose ideology of any sort. But if you are teaching about the existence of different people, I think that's absolutely fair.
Yeah, no, that's fine. It's just as liberals, don't we value choice and freedom of choice? How we raise our kids?
Well, choice is important as a general concept, if that's what you
Like
mean.
for me, it doesn't bother me, pride or how people want to live their life.
Yeah.
It doesn't take away my rights at all. But public schools are making this mandatory. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but it depends on what part is being made mandatory. If you're saying that different people with different characteristics exist, I think that's fine. And I don't think anyone should be allowed to opt out of hearing about the existence of different types of people.
Some people feel like liberals are heavily indoctrinating children in school.
I agree that people feel that way.
When it comes to religious studies, they don't really emphasize it as much as RSE. And I think because teachers generally are heavily liberalized. In Britain, some schools have fully embraced the, woke culture. When I say woke, I mean the whole non-binary, the whole, we don't approach students by, hi boys, hi girls, we don't use this type of language. And also, when you show a family structure of a man and a woman, and they have two children in front of them, mommy and daddy, you don't really need to explain or give context about the fact that those children are someone else's child. Do we just not give context to children, like the two daddies, that's maybe one of them is the father of that child, but the mommy's not in the picture? Because do we give that context? No, we don't. We just let children have this idea of, oh wow, I can, two daddies can, biologically produce and so on. That's very sneaky, and that's going to create confusion. Some children will ask, the parents at 5 years old, 6 years old, 7, these ages, like, oh, where do babies come from? Some parents who are, have conservative values and so on, they don't want to tell their children how, a child is produced, the action. They don't want to, because they feel like they don't want to sexualize their children at that young, because kids shouldn't be really thinking about these types of topics. And at such a young age, they want their child to explore their childhood a little bit more. So parents who tend to be conservative, when they're put in this situation, they just say, for example, I've had friends who've literally been put in this situation, and they'll say, oh, mama and baba will pray for a baby, and then mama gets pregnant and she goes to the hospital and C-section and baby comes out. Oh, technically you're not really lying, because some women do have, a C-section, and when that child is older, when you feel like it's appropriate to tell. Whereas when you have two daddies, adventure with two daddies or two mummies, and a child, for example, in class raises a question, but I thought only, a man and a woman can have a child. How would a teacher in Britain deal with that situation?
Computer says no.
Julia Donaldson, one of her books, Tyrannosaurus Drip, this heavily glorifies vegans and vegetarian vegans, and demonizes meat eaters. If you look at it, it's very black and white. It's not something I would like my child to be exposed to, because again, I want my child to have actual critical thinking. Are we really going to make a moral argument forward about how eating meat is immoral? Are we really? No, we don't have time for that on this channel.
I would challenge them to volunteer, to go and spend a bit of time in a classroom and see if there is actually indoctrination happening, or is it just delivering a curriculum based on what is reality?
I mean, I'm sure you've heard many stories are coming out now in Britain, in Wales, about people want to identify as cats, and teachers have to affirm that gender.
again, I would say if you have any concerns about this, go and spend time in your community where your children are being educated and see for yourself. It's very easy to inflate some of these stories and these headlines to make people understandably very scared. In my experience, usually the reality is much more mundane. Should probably join in with my colleagues.
No worries.
Nice talking to you.
Could you educate me about trans rights?
All right, more trans healthcare rights. It's the wait list currently for top surgery if you're a trans man is 6 years, I believe. So you get on there, say you're 20, you know, lots of transphobes say that we can't decide, whatever, but say you're an adult, you're 21 years old, you're really sure of who you are, same as lots of people are at that age, and you go, okay, I want to actually make my body how it is, you would be waiting until you're 27 to actually.
So it's a 6 year, is that what you say?
6
6 year
years
waiting list. And that is for upper surgery, yeah?
Yeah, it's for upper surgery, yeah.
Oh, right, okay. But it's not the same for people waiting for other, like, knee replacement surgery, because our NHS is underfunded?
Yeah, I agree. So we should fund the NHS more as well.
Just to be viewed as like normal people that are the same as everyone else, because all people are just
Now we
people.
all have the freedom to exist under a secular state. How do you feel about RSE being made mandatory? Introducing non-binary transgender to children.
Yeah,
It's good?
yeah.
Yeah?
I think everyone needs to learn about as much as they can.
But
so,
if we live under a secular state, why is the government making this mandatory for everyone? Isn't this a bit of a dictatorship?
No, of course it's not a
It's not good.
dictatorship.
So is that the only thing that...
No, there's also the fact that Parliament recently banned the discussion of trans people in classroom. The guidelines now say if you're a teacher and someone in your class tells you that they want to use a different name, the government guidelines says that you should tell their parents. If their parents are abusive or something, that could be really dangerous to the child.
So you want what's happening in America, like teachers
our government.
affirming the gender of the student?
Yeah, I think like when I first came out as trans, my teachers were really supportive, and it made it a lot easier coming out to my mum and stuff. And I have friends that's parents are abusive and kick them out if they did that. And so our teachers shouldn't have to out their kids. They should make it easier for us, and the government aren't going along with that.
that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Well, for example, for trans healthcare, trans people don't have the same. So everyone has the right to informed consent. So your doctor explains what are the risks of, and then you can do it. Whereas with trans people, you're not allowed to just get informed consent through your GP. You have to be referred to one of, I think, like 5 gender clinics in the whole country.
In the UK, we have 5, is it?
Yeah, only 5. It's vastly not enough for the amount of trans people we have, but yeah,
So you
have to be certified as mentally unwell before you're allowed to be recognised as a trans person.
Oh, so you go through the doctor, then transgender affirming clinics, right? Then where it should be available on NHS. Is that what you're saying?
So you have to wait for, at the moment, the waiting times are about 6 years,
Yeah,
whereas
okay.
we have a legal right, everyone here has a legal right to get healthcare within 28 days of being requested, whereas for trans people, you are not entitled to that.
For example, upper surgery, like having your breast implants, that does tend to be a waiting list even on NHS as well. Like even people who are not getting affirming gender surgery, they have to wait as well because NHS is underfunded. So is that a unique trans issue or is it just an issue of NHS?
So we need funding throughout the board for medical. It's a joke at the moment, thanks for
I agree. Are you aware that NHS is being privatized and soon we will be like America?
Yeah, it's disgusting. It's really atrocious. I've not been able to access most healthcare most of the time because it's just. Like,
How old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Another personal question you don't need to answer.
I'm 29. If you've got the money, you can just go private. Like, yeah. So no.
One more issue that trans are fighting for in UK, rights that they are fighting for.
I don't know. I mean, most people just want to be able to live their lives, like
But,
to get
we have
married.
rights, isn't it?
Yeah.
We're accepted. Like this wouldn't be able to happen in Morocco, for example. But it is accepted. Like people don't really care anymore.
I have been attacked on the street quite a few
Can I
times.
ask by who? Who are these archetypal people?
I mean, normally it's multi-level. Like normally it's people who they're suffering from other health problems or
I mean, like what
substance abuse.
demographic? Teenagers, older people, men?
Usually male. Yeah, usually a bit older, but I have got shit from kids before.
Yeah,
but like,
kids can be
yeah,
rowdy.
it's just kids in it.
Legalize LGBTQ relationships in all these countries, yeah?
Yes, that's right. Yeah,
I'm from Morocco.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's not. We need legislation that reflects people's equality. We need the right to have loving relationships.
Pride is a protest. So what is the protest about? What rights do we don't have in the UK for LGBTQ plus community?
Well, in the UK, we do have a lot of rights, more than we used to. We have the right to get married and the right to recognise each other's partners formally. And but there's still a lot of discrimination as well.
Would you say that exists with every group?
Yes, it does. Yeah, there's discrimination against many groups. All people can experience that when in a minority. In the UK, we don't always have the right to sort of discuss homosexuality openly.
In what way, sorry?
In some situations that we don't. For example, in a school.
Oh, that's an interesting point. RSE, relationship sex education, has been made mandatory in Britain, which means they're going to be introducing to children non-binary and so forth.
They have sexual education, you're right in that sense, but they don't have sort of like groups to support gay and lesbian transgender groups within the school system.
Do they have that for heterosexual people in schools?
No, they don't, because heterosexual people being in the large majority, their relationships are more accepted.
His point is nil, because there is a school nurse, she is there, she's trained, and she represents everyone. Just being completely honest here, I can't help but feel, this is just my subjective opinion, these people suffer from a lack of maybe hobbies, entitlement, privilege, because in pragmatic societies, people are just not doing this. Finding out that pride is a protest is confusing to me. Gay people, lesbians, trans, they have literally all the rights that the average person has. Nobody cares if you in the UK, if you make fun of someone who's trans, or you harass them, you will get arrested, and rightly so. And that's because we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of choice and so on, but it's within limits. You can't go harassing people. The alphabet people, they truly are represented in this country. They have rights. I mean, my sister, for example, who goes to comprehensive school, they're educated throughout the years to respect people, to not harass people who are different. So it's kind of like we're already socialized into respecting everyone else, and rightly so. So I don't, personally for me, I'm yet to be educated about what is the protest about, because if you're protesting about trans women having access to female toilets, biological female bathroom, now you're infringing on someone else's right, and that is biological born women. When I see people trying to compare Britain to Scandinavian countries like Sweden, for example, oh, it's it's fine out there, they use unisex toilets all the time. Yeah, that's their country. British people are different, even though they all have like a European history that they share with each other. For example, in Europe, it is not frowned upon to be like nude at the beach. It's just part of they're socialized into that, whereas British people on the general basis, they don't feel comfortable with that at all,
and are less likely to face discrimination.
Right, okay, interesting points. How do you feel about children being introduced non-binary in public schools when they're like 3 years old?
As long as it's age appropriate.
How would you measure it?
Well, you'd measure it exactly in the same way that you'd measure heterosexual relationships. So it would be the same standards, whether it's holding hands or a kiss that's acceptable in public. That would depend on the majority and the moral decision of the public, really.
Yeah. What do you tell parents who respect LGBT, who respect all human rights, but they say, I don't want my child to be taught about non-binary at this age? Should that be introduced to children as impressionable as 7 years old, 6 years old?
Right, well, children should be used to seeing people of different genders and accept that as something that's normal, but they don't have to see the sexuality of those genders until they're an older age, and they don't have to shouldn't learn that until they're in puberty and then teenage years.
They're just blinded by love. You know that saying? And the same thing can happen when, you know, you love your ideology, whether it be a religious person who, you know, they kind of twist the scriptures on an emotional level. But this issue, this pattern also exists amongst some liberalized individuals, such as this gentleman over here, who, by the way, it was actually a pleasure to converse. So he is blinded by his ideology. We're all being exposed to, you know, tailored content. If you don't make an effort to see what the other side is saying and, you know, back away from the situation and, you know, really think about it rationally, you're just gonna, you know, be in a box. My movement can do no wrong. Pride is a protest. What are we protesting about? Don't really know. You know, biological male people can wear whatever they want. If there are other people, if there's some lunatic harassing a trans person, they'll get arrested. Schools, by law now, they have to, you know, give the information to these children who identify as non-binary, or, you know, people who belong to this ideology. They literally have the information to equip them with where they need to go to seek, you know, help, and so on, so on. So I just personally don't get it.
What do you want?
It's not that simple.
What do you want?
Oh, it's the non-binary flag. Although the person identifies a gender, it all falls under the non-binary spectrum. For those who are interested, my pronouns are any and everything. I rock with everything.
Have a good time.
You too.
First attack. So I saw socialism, and I saw unite and fight for LGBTQ plus rights, fight for socialism. What does socialism got to do with LGBTQ plus? Please educate me.
Well, we just we think like the best grounds for fighting. Should I take the microphone?
Okay.
Well, we just think the best grounds for fighting for equality is with, you know, the power of the working people have because of their role in society. You know, we see how reactionary capitalist politicians use issues like sexuality to divide people. We want to argue for like an approach that unites people around their class, and that's the basis for equality for all sorts of groups.
United we stand, divided we fall.
Exactly.
I completely agree with that.
There is anti-protest legislation being brought in by the government, and
You mean the one that was brought in the first year of COVID-19 to
there's more coming in now.
Is it?
It's really aimed at the trade. It's really aimed at the trade unions, but the LGBTQ also will be a target of it. I mean, I've got a quote here from the Tory Deputy Chairman Lee Anderson, has said that the party will run their next general election campaign on a mixture of culture wars and trans debate. Now, they have nothing to offer ordinary people because they're cutting our services. All the mental health issues that people who are trans might suffer in a society where they need the mental or physical health services of the NHS. The NHS has been slashed. The service has been slashed since going back to 2010 and before, but accelerated since then. Because they create waiting lists for everyone, they will try and shift the blame onto minority groups. So they'll say, I've got a neighbour, for instance, who reckons the problem with the NHS, she's a Tory voter, the problem with the NHS is all these gender reassignment operations being paid for through the NHS budget. Now, we've just gone through the COVID with the personal protective equipment, these massive contracts being given to Tory cronies, massive amounts of taxpayers' money being wasted left, right and centre. Even one of the Tory party's own, Michelle Mone, Baroness Mone, is being pursued legally because her rip-off of the NHS and the taxpayers' money was so blatant, even the Tories have had to prosecute her.
It's my turn.
How do you feel about RSE, relationship sex education, being made mandatory in school? They're going to introduce children idea of being non-binary.
Well, I mean, I don't know, we introduce children to the idea of having gender roles automatically, so why not
Can you give an example?
Yeah, well, when you're born, they tell you you're either a boy or a girl, right? So that would be the example.
Okay, have a safe flight.
Binary example, but also we have like the Barbie doll, so that is considered to be some kind of role model for girls. So there are like role models pushed by large corporations. Is it Mattel Corporation owns the Barbie brand? Capitalism has an interest in selling stuff to both the binary genders. The people are being molded on those bases. There's a new Barbie film coming out. I don't know how whether it's going to challenge the stereotype.
Do you guys ever think about dying?
Traditionally, Barbie is a bit about traditional roles for girls, and then there've been traditional toys like weapons of, kids with machine guns, boys with machine guns.
Bristol universities and Nottingham University as well, they've literally banned the word mankind and manpower to be more inclusive. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have, make sure to like, subscribe. It really helps push out my videos out there.